Accepting Christianity in the 3rd century made Ethiopia the first state in the world to accept Christianity as their official religion. This did not seem to be very zealot in their reality. Now, they might have been pushing some other ideas out, as it seems they were converting from Judaism into Christianity, because Judaism seems to have existed in this area for at least 1,000 years. This being confirmed, of course, by the fact that even the Bible sees a lot of the Christians as Jews, at least in practice. This amazing church was built by King Azana. He was not the first king of Christianity in Ethiopia, but he certainly went a long way to expand it. Some people, especially those living in Ethiopia, believe that a lot of traditions and a lot of things that were taken in the future that would be Islam were taken from this time period. Prayers that seem to mimic exact words and in phrasing, especially from the familiar language of Ge'ez, a somewhat Semitic language in origin. Now, when I say Semitic, I mean Afroasiatic starts in Africa, moves to Arabia, and then has a swift return later in Ethiopia. It's hard to dispute this fact when you consider the fact that most of the words that are in Ge'ez and Arabic are very similar. There are a few telltale signs to let you know that the Ethiopians were sort of pioneering Christianity. The first is the make of the churches. They seem to follow their own style, not picking up ideas until the medieval times when they start copying castles from Europe. If we zoom into this church, we can see here that there's poles all over. You see those gray dots? Those are actually holding up the walls, so you can put many levels on the wall, making it stronger, something that was not seen or is not seen anywhere else in the world. The Christians also had these moon signals that you can see on the walls. These are pre-Christian, but you can see that the Christians adopted it into their religion. At the very top of the obelisks found in Ethiopia, what you see is the same moon symbol. But not only that, on the very middle of the buildings, you see every piece, you see a depiction of those very same pillars that I was telling you about that hold the walls and guarantee that you can make another story on it. Obviously, it is not necessary in this building, but as you can see, it's there. And right at the very top is that symbol. While this symbol can be found in Lalibela, and in fact, the portrayal of Lalibela, especially with people around it, makes you think, how could you not believe in this? Think about when this was created. The power, the majesty of it would make you think, okay, well, we're definitely somewhere in the future here creating things like this. And of course, with the mixture of local cultures, like those symbols I told you, that semicircle that might resemble a moon, it's possible that it resembles a person or something else that I'm not going to mention right now. But there are other places as well. Like in 1200 AD, there's a church that was made by an Ethiopian Christian, and this is what it looked like. From the inside, it looks like any typical Ethiopian church. Now, of course, one of the things about it that's very unique is the rock gong, which is a typical African thing, but also you look at the walls there, they're all carvings, they're not layered bricks. So it's one giant rock that has been carved into what appears to be a building. You can't call it a building because it's not being built in the way that a building would be built, stone over stone. It's Christian in its reality, and that's obvious. And all the Africanness about it is completely there, though it is Christian. But what's really interesting for me as well is how, though the cross is one of those symbols that is used often for Christianity, in this specific location, that symbol I'm talking about, that I think most people around the world have no idea even exists, you can find in this location. But where is it? Well, these arcs kind of represent it, but you will see it in its true sense. On top of the roof, you can see here almost every feature that was there in Aksum, in those obelisks prior to Christianity, are still here. The Christian cross is put right in the middle in order to make it very Christian in its belief. But clearly, this meant too much to these people to abandon it for the Christian symbols. So let's look at it deeply, right? So you can see there that it's got the body of it, right? And then that semicircle. The body probably represents the obelisk part of it. And then, of course, you have those little things that were used for separating the walls. You can see it right there. And then you can see the cross. It's amazing to think that these people are actually still preserving this to this day. Let's quickly return to the more familiar ones. As you can see here, the symbol is everywhere. What is this? What is this supposed to represent? Is it a moon? Is it a sun? Is it the rising sun? Is it a human being? Why is it cut off like that in the middle? And why do the pillars themselves have a symbolic meaning to the point where these people have to carry it with them? Now, let's think of how we could solve a lot of these problems. So, the idea of making the walls out of one solid piece of rock, where could that possibly have come from? By the way, the answer, I've already given it to you. But think about it. Everywhere else in the world, the way you build buildings is you take bricks, you put them together, and you build a building. Even in the prehistoric kingdoms of the Swahili coast, there is nothing close to what this is. Even though the walls are huge and long, there is nothing close to this. So, where could this idea have possibly come from? This is unsolved, but I have a very, very important theory. So, the earliest that we've seen of these buildings are clearly not made like this obelisk right here, made of stone, but instead was made out of bricklaying and stuff like that and putting pillars in. So, my theory is that these buildings, these obelisks, are like the symbols in Ethiopia. Remember, I told you that there are symbols in Ethiopia. A Christian cross would count as the same, where the symbol doesn't symbolize power, it is power. So, in other words, if you take a picture of a bird, let's do an example. If you take a picture of a bird, wrap it around your head, then you should be able to fly. It's not that the symbol is symbolizing a bird, it's that the symbol is a bird and the power is in the symbol. And in the same way, these obelisks, they're not stones representing those buildings, but instead they're thought to be those buildings. So, in other words, they're actually useful in real life. And in order to copy that, what they did was they copied the obelisks. They copied the stone in the obelisk and made it from other giant rocks. So they took giant rocks and copied the obelisk, not the original design that was bricklaying. And just like the Egyptians, remember the pyramid in ancient Egypt, the giant pyramid or the obelisks, they're not representative. They themselves are actual things. So let's look at this in another way. Imagine, why would you go from bricklaying to rock if it's not to do this? Clearly, they wanted the spirit of this to be represented within their real culture and their real history. And this happens all the time, of course, that Christianity takes a local spin. We see this in the Kingdom of Congo, where they say that all the people, Jesus Christ and everybody, came from Congo. And we see this spin in Africa, we see it in Asia, in the Americas, Japan. And the reason for it is because, of course, if you want to adopt a religion, you can't just throw away the culture of the region. With this in mind, it's important to understand then that the brand of Christianity in Ethiopia is truly unique in its own way. But not only that, this represents Judaism. Remember, they also accepted the Judaic faith a long time ago. In fact, some historians say that the connection between Israel and Ethiopia probably goes back, to the earliest people in Israel. While the Kingdom of Congo was getting rid of idols, it seems like the Ethiopian religion, the Ethiopian brand of Christianity, didn't mind having idols. They eventually got banned later on, but you can see in their books that there's idols everywhere. So let's address one more African concept about those buildings. You will notice that in Africa there's this overlapping, and you see it in its music as well. So in the music of Africa, you hear the drumming, it's all played at the same time, creating this warpness of sound. You can see the triangles there at the bottom. But let's look at the star, right? You can see that inside the star, there are two, let's say, squares. The first square is sort of sitting at an angle, and the second one has a face in it. This represents something that is unique in Africa, which is internal worlds, world inside world. So you see this in Nigeria or in West Africa, where in the symbols they say, okay, you get in and then you get in. It's almost like Russian dolls, you know, in and then in and then in. And at the very center is the spirit world. This you can see in the architecture. The spirit world, or the most valued, is the Christian cross, but it's inside of this symbol, this crescent symbol that we see in Ethiopia. This version of this cross is also inside the symbol of these buildings. And again, you can see here that it's unnecessary. You don't need these stumps, which are just now carvings, but the symbol traps the cross, the Christian cross, inside of this symbol. So let's talk about the symbols themselves. As you can see, they can get real complicated. So this book by Jacques is called, or Jacques, is called Art That Heals the Image as Medicine in Ethiopia. So the symbol itself is medicine. Where else have we heard this before in Africa? Well, let's check. In West Africa, of course. As we read here, The smallpox is not very destructive. Inoculation, which is practiced by the Negroes, contributes without doubt to prevent the ravages of this dreadful malady. The Morabouts alone practice physic, which is confined to the application of a few simple remedies. Now, here's the important part, or to composition of certain charms written on paper, which they make their patients burn and drink the ashes. So you can see that the charm itself, the symbol, the writing, whatever it is itself the important thing. And so, in the same way, the building, the rock building itself, is the holiness of it. It's not it's not to copy, it's not just an aesthetic thing, it's not just beauty or anything like that. They believe that those obelisks themselves represent religion, and they represent power and the ability to tap into the spiritual world. And again, this is, we see all over West Africa and Southern Africa and everything. Remember those symbols I've always shown you that we see all over Africa? Those symbols are religious, but those symbols are not religious in a sense of they represent the spirit world. People think that they are the spirit world in the same way that a snake is a spirit. Now that might not make sense to you, but that's the religion. If this is true, then why would Christians be playing with such dangerous magic? Well, we'll talk about that when we timeline the kings of Ethiopia. Now, some of us might be thinking, how is it possible to be symbolic and literal at the same time? Well, if we take computers, for example, let's take the trash can symbol. The trash can symbol is a symbol of an actual trash can, but it's not an actual trash can on a computer. But if you press on it, it deletes things, or at least it holds things that are deleted. And if you empty it, then those things disappear forever. This is the same concept, that those buildings are symbols, but they're functional. So, in the same way, remember, they gave them the medicine, they give the people the medicine, then they write on a piece of paper charms, and then they burn those charms, meaning that the ash of it still holds that charm, and then they drink it. So it's a combination of symbol and reality. They actually drink an actual medicine, as he says there, the physics of the people. They drink the actual medicine, and then they take the charm on top. Just like how on a computer you delete by putting in a trash can, open the folder by opening the folder button. But asking the question, is it a symbol or is it literal, is as useless as asking it on a computer. On a computer, when you press on library, is it not really a library? When you press home, does it not take you home? When you press volume, does it not increase or decrease the volume? When you press cut, does it not actually cut? But at the same time, it's not exactly the same as the symbols in real life. Now, I've always wanted to make this similarity, this comparison, that those symbols in Africa were of things that they were familiar with. And so it's as complicated as this. I wouldn't say it's a language in the same way that like A, B, C, D, but it's as complicated as this. That if I came to you and I gave you scissors, you would know, okay, cut. I give you an arrow, okay, that's up. If I give you a home, you go, that's home, and things like that. And this was the symbol writing system that existed all over Africa. And I assure you that those buildings and all of that is a part of a writing system. That's why they don't get rid of it. And of course, if they were allowed to grow, who knows exactly where they would have gone as a historical and reality. Would they, like every other culture, abandon the symbolism just like they did in the buildings and then used it even without the original context